the key highlights from his report that was recently released about AgTech, which is quite interesting in India. And it'll be followed by a few remarks by Andrew Goodland, lead agricultural specialist at the Ag and Food GP global practice at the World Bank. Following which, Parmesh will moderate a panel of esteemed experts to look at how public sector investments can kind of can discuss the need for public sector investments to encourage the use of the ecosystem development for the deployment of AgTech in a more sustainable manner, and not just deployment but also adoption, I hope. So without much ado, I just wanted to make a few introductory remarks. And just by the way, just please keep sending your questions in the chat. We'll have a Q&A session at the end, and we'll direct the questions to the panelists or the participants as appropriate. So just by way of context, right? So, over the last decade, if you look at the advancement of technology, the Internet of Things, remote sensing, satellite mapping, so satellite imaging, geomapping, use of robotics, big data, artificial intelligence, all these are converging, right? So, and the convergence has also led to interesting business models that are emerging, and the application of those business models in our field, in ag and agribusiness. Against this backdrop, and of course, digital coverage as well as digital costs are reducing. Of course, it's spotty, but at least it's improved substantially over the last decade. So against this backdrop, about 18 months ago, the World Bank Group, IFC, and the World Bank, we engaged in a deep dive in this space. Just to, Parmesh and I led the study basically to look at where technology is in the agricultural space, just to get a lay of the land and to see how we can engage in this space more productively and what do we want to do in this space. So it was a kind of a deep dive that we took to our board to kind of describe what we want to do in this space. So when we looked at what we want to do, it's essentially fell in 4 buckets. One is, of course, looking at productivity improvements of food production, looking at supply chain efficiency improvements, looking at digital technology for finance, fintech applications in. I'm sorry, somebody has to mute.
Those conditions were relating to independent monitoring, basically. So they were the condition of the funding agreement.
I would urge people.
Excuse me. Whoever is now speaking to some other, please mute yourself. You're disturbing the whole webinar.
Special Robert.
Please. Who is that, Vivek? Can you mute him?
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Prasad.
So the third bucket, as I said, was the application of financial technologies to deploy digital solutions, especially for access to finance in smallholder economies. And the fourth is looking at technology as it pertains to how we can actually improve the sustainability of food systems. So when you look at productivity, it's not just precision ag. It's actually using a very we've invested in companies, of course, doing precision ag in many regions, but we've also looked at interesting companies that are looking at improving soil characteristics, right? So Pattern Ag is an example of an investment that we've done, which looks at DNA of the soil microbes, and developing biological solutions for seed coatings as well as crop care. Similarly, on the supply chain angle, we're looking at solutions that can actually minimize food waste and food loss across the supply chain and improve the efficiency of the whole kind of outside the farm gate to the consumer the link. So we've invested in India. We're I think e-commerce, we all know we've benefited from e-commerce in the food side through the COVID period. So it's we've actually invested in companies like Big Basket, which provide access to food in a pretty interesting way. It's not just that, but we've also invested in companies like Twiga, which is a very interesting supply chain integrator in Kenya, which brings in smallholder horticultural production to puts food safety, food quality systems on top, and matches them with roadside shop vendors, mom and pop retailers. So these are very some interesting models that we've looked at on the supply chain side. And on the digital finance side, we're testing new models, not just on the production side, on the upstream production of food and commodities, but also on the distribution side. For example, we're testing a credit scoring and digital finance for mom and pop retailers and distributors for Coke in Indonesia using a platform that has been developed for distributors specifically, which includes credit scoring, access to finance, and things like that. So the key issue there is to lower the cost of access to finance and trying to make it easy for people to actually get financing, which is one of the greatest stumbling blocks that we see in most of our economies that we work in. And on the sustainability angle, similarly, we've invested and looked at companies, mainstream companies adopting traceability using blockchain for cocoa supply chains or soybean supply chains in Brazil, for example. So we're exploring various options in terms of investing directly in companies using the venture capital model, which are kind of the technology providers. And we're also looking at models to look at mainstream companies adopting technology using precision ag and others. So with that backdrop, of course, it's for us easy to put these in buckets, but there are lots of kind of factors that enable the adoption and kind of use of technology, right? So you have obviously the ag fundamentals in any country, the digital infrastructure fundamentals in any country. On top of that, you overlay that with the ag skills, the software skills, extension services, as well as the digital skills that are prevailing in those countries. And on top of that, you have the ecosystem, right? The entrepreneurial ecosystem, you have the funding ecosystem, which is a highly complex kind of environment, especially in our markets. We work in emerging markets mainly, which requires both public and private sector kind of getting together to find solutions. So when we looked at, we went out, discussed this with many external partners as well. And one of the key feedback that came to us was that, yes, technology is available, but adoption is not prevalent, right? So what do we do to actually look at appropriate models or adapting models to encourage adoption? Because we do think that AgTech is a pretty interesting, is at a pretty interesting stage where adoption could be one of those S curves, right? So that kind of set our goals for what we want to do in the space. So from our from the private sector angle, I see we're looking at doubling our investments over the next 5 to 7 years in the space every year. And the World Bank is looking at a step change in the number of digital interventions that they will do, as well as I think this webinar is part of one of the outcomes of our kind of engagement was the series of webinars that we're doing on digital ag. So it's both creation of knowledge, dissemination of knowledge, as well as interventions, programs with governments on the public sector side to create public goods, including data structures, data stacks, and things like that. So clearly, we're at a stage where AgTech is hugely interesting for us. At least, most companies that we talk to are quite keen on adopting relevant technology and trying to make it, the price points, make it affordable, especially to the smallholders, right? On the supply side and on the distribution side, make it cheaper for consumers to actually gain access to food and commodities. And the principal goal for us is how it can impact the world as we know it, going out 20, 30 years in terms of building a better planet, within planetary boundaries of resources that we have. How do we build, healthy, contribute to building healthy people, and finally contributing to healthy economies by supporting these smallholders to, gain, reasonable livelihoods. So with that, I just wanted to present a kind of an overview. Now I would, my great pleasure to invite Raman to kind of discuss the key findings from the recent report. I went through it. It's fascinating.
Prasad, we are switching a little bit. We're letting Andrew go after you because you talk about IFC. Andrew will talk and then Raman will come in.
Okay.
Andrew, you have 5 minutes now to talk about World Bank. Andrew is now leading our, coordinating our India program in currently based in Colombo, but moving to Delhi soon. And Andrew, can you talk for 5 minutes about
Sure.
what World Bank is doing? Over to you.
Thanks.
And then Raman will come back to you after this.
Okay, thanks, Pamesh, and thanks for accommodating the schedule change. I have a hard stop in 20 minutes, and it's good to follow on anyway. I think from hearing Prasad, private sector perspective, in what is the World Bank's role in India around this agenda? Why are we engaged? And what can we really do to help foster a more vibrant AgTech sector? Prasad already mentioned the higher sort of level global objectives for ag and food systems. Healthy planet, healthy economies, healthy people. In India, on the World Bank side, we break this down into 4 interlinked objectives, creating a resilient, resource-efficient agriculture growth, improving access to efficient markets, developing value chains, increasing competitiveness. Thirdly, around the inclusive jobs and livelihood sector, leading to higher rural incomes. And finally, food systems which are able to deliver safe, diversified, and nutritious food. I mean, when you look at those objectives, you'd argue that all of these require AgTech. And actually, in the absence of AgTech and progress in terms of AgTech, it's questionable whether you reach any of those objectives. And if you do, it'll be done sort of slowly and effectively. So it's real, it's the enabler, the technology, and I think the question is how you then bring in that technology to support this transformation. I took a look at the report, and thanks so much to the authors for sharing it and giving an opportunity to have this discussion. You see a majority of AgTech companies are currently in India operate in the sort of market efficiency space broadly, trading platforms and such like. But I'd argue that they're near limitless opportunities for AgTech to come in across the board, including, I think some of these have been highlighted with the tragedy of COVID, is really seeing that there are even more opportunities than maybe we first thought for advancing digital and contactless technologies, etc. So where does the World Bank fit into this? I think the questions that we seek to answer is this. Firstly, what is the role of the public sector to encourage and promote the agriculture technology sector? What are the policy? What are the investment opportunities to create this ecosystem, conducive investment environment to incentivize investment in the sector? And how do we ensure that investment going into AgTech is inclusive, helping to contribute to efficient, sustainable outcomes? When I'm talking about inclusion, I'm really thinking about the World Bank's primary target group in smallholder producers, small micro enterprises, and consumers, of course. So, what would it take? The World Bank has 3 sort of primary instruments or levers that we use. Firstly, there's the policy dialogue. Secondly, there's analytics, and thirdly, investment. I think on the policy side, we're in a very interesting space at the moment in India. Market integration remains a significant challenge. We know that the laws and regulations which are in place, which vary drastically across different states, add to uncertainties in supply chains, and ultimately this drives up transaction costs. We've seen that the use of e-trading platforms, digital price discovery, other ICT-driven solution, improved digital connectivity is creating a more conducive condition. And one of the roles of the World Bank is to really help to sort of popularize these approaches and put that into the policy arena to help to inform policy development. And I would say, I think more needs to happen in terms of actually consultation with the industry to better identify policy bottlenecks and ultimately the solution to those. Analytics are the base of understanding the needs of the sector, what's driving the sector, what's holding the sector back. Policy and investment needs to be evidence-based. I think the Think Ag review of the current state of AgTech in India is a really good example for helping us to understand what's out there at the moment, and therefore helping to develop appropriate intervention strategies to further unlock the sector. Excuse me. And of course, finally, on the investment side, and in the ag sector in India, World Bank has over $3 billion in terms of our current portfolio, and a lot of this, if not directly targeting ag tech, is creating opportunities for ag tech. We need to both continue to finance some of the more sort of traditional investments, such as for public infrastructure, addressing market failures, and think more about how we actually use ostensibly publicly implemented projects to incentivize and promote innovation, including in the ag tech space. Build the capabilities of institutions, including public institutions, to support the development and innovation in this sector. So, I mean, I think that one of the sort of headline findings of the report is that the future is positive for ag tech in India, and I would agree to that. Despite recent downturns in investment, I think the opportunities are huge, but of course the challenge always remains is how to turn these good ideas into viable, bankable businesses. And I hope that some of the discussion today will focus on that. Thank you, and I look forward to good discussion, and apologies that I need to drop out in around 10 minutes.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for setting the scene from the World Bank's perspective. Now I'd like to invite Raman to kind of take us through some of the key highlights of the review. Raman has had a long, illustrious career in the agribusiness space, and starting at Hindustan Lever. It's very interesting to see his CV, and he's been a consultant to various international organizations on the agricultural side. So, without much ado, please, Raman, your floor.
Thanks, Prasad, and thanks, Andrew, for setting the context. I want to thank Parmesh and the World Bank team for hosting us. Also want to highlight that Rabo Foundation, Bayer Crop Science, and ADB Ventures have been partners in this journey of bringing this report out. So good evening to everyone. ThinkAg is a not-for-profit platform established to accelerate investments and adoption of innovations in the food and agri-value chains. The investment report, the second in the series, has been the outcome of a collaborative process where many of you have generously given your time and valuable insights. In the next 10 minutes or so, I'll share highlights of the investment report, and which hopefully will contribute to today's discussion and lead to deeper dialogue in the coming weeks and months. Investments in Indian AgTech slowed down in 2020, attributed to some extent to a pause in deal-making activity during the ongoing pandemic. The pandemic has accelerated adoption of digital tools across sectors and income strata, and will likely positively impact the fortunes of AgTech companies in the coming years. This is already borne out, with investments thus far in 2021 being at par with investments in AgTech in all of 2020. Last year, ThinkAg had predicted that growing investments in downstream AgTech and AgFintech. While the former has grown in prominence during the pandemic, AgFintech has seen fewer new entrants and low investments in the year gone by. While the need for AgFintech solutions, as Prasad also pointed out, remains significant, it is increasingly being serviced by existing AgTech companies by adding an interface layer to their core operations. The AgTech categories that you see, they identify the core areas of operation for Indian AgTechs, Many players are now blurring these lines by dabbling across multiple parts of the value chain. This is an evolving space. As service and delivery become increasingly differentiated, we may see new categories emerging or the boundaries sharpening. A few sectors remain absent from the investment landscape, specifically biotechnology and biomaterials for use as ag inputs, processing, and shelf life extension. I mean, some of the examples that Prasad gave are from international markets, and I think there are things that could be done in India as well. Automation, given that India is labor starved in the agriculture space, both on quality and productivity, farm mechanization has not really picked up in India from an investment activity perspective. Unique deals in this space account for a consistent proportion of deals since 2019 and a slightly higher value. As expected, majority of the capital flows have gone into follow-on deals. Interestingly, the subsector breakdown of first-time deals is fairly similar to that observed in the follow-on rounds, with the notable exceptions of ag input supply chain category that saw a higher proportion of first-time deals, indicating increased experimentation with novel farm proximate operating models. Various indicators point to increased traction for AgTech models, and Andrew pointed this out in his remarks. Though investments fell overall, investments in higher end funding brackets above 5 million grew in 2020, shifting the median investment up by 50% since 2019, a very significant shift indeed. AgTechs that raised the largest 10 deals took an average just under 3 years since their first million to do so, compared to 4 years for the corresponding period in 2019, corresponding group in 2019, suggesting that some models are able to scale or grow at a faster pace than in the past, and therefore access larger caches of capital. As a broader base of entrepreneurs enter this space, we are likely to see more solutions and business models that get tested in the value chains. Sector agnostic investors are rapidly growing their participation in the Indian AgTech space. Almost all the new sources of venture capital in the sector have been generalist funds. This signifies growing awareness of the sector's potential and a more informed ability to assess business models and the role of technology in agriculture. New investors are entering to provide late-stage growth capital, signifying greater investor confidence in the sector. Such investors, with previous exposure to AgTech investments in other geographies, could become crucial players in Indian AgTech space going forward. However, corporate venture capital flows from traditional Indian agribusinesses continue to remain sparse and limited to late-stage investments in downstream AgTech solutions. Debt, though much lower in proportion, venture debt investments tend to follow equity funding. These have fallen since 2019, even though debt from conventional sources increased over the same period. Overall, investments in Indian AgTech come largely through equity investments, with non-equity funds from venture debt and conventional sources accounting for less than 5%. Growing maturity and attractiveness of the sector notwithstanding, this speaks to the enduring risk perception of AgTech solutions, especially for new, yet to be proven models. The fragmented nature of agriculture supply chains in India, and as I'm sure in other parts of Asia, is encouraging the more mature AgTech startups to develop full stack solutions that provide a bouquet of services to multiple stakeholders like farmers, ag input companies, and agribusinesses on the output side. These solutions aim to benefit from accruing higher revenues per user across these different stakeholders. The B2B SaaS models are more often seen with point solutions in the precision AgTech category. Their plug-and-play nature enables them to scale effectively through partnerships with other AgTechs in the ecosystem, as well as in other markets globally. However, they run the risk of having finite markets and sources of value to scale. The inefficiencies in India's highly intermediated supply chains create fertile ground for tech-enabled solutions. Digital interventions should enable operators and the larger ecosystem to be more efficient, rather than merely adding a digital layer over the existing physical supply chain. That said, given the need for a localized high-touch approach, it remains to be seen if digital-based disintermediation is indeed viable. The freemium model, relatively nascent in the Indian AgTech space, is one where startups provide a non-monetized offering to attract customers and then generate revenue through supplementation of additional services. AgTechs catering to farmers face a high threshold in terms of being paid for services and linking those services to enhanced income outcomes. Indian AgTech innovation so far has comprised largely of applying digital technologies to upstream and downstream supply chains. The use of fourth industrial revolution tools in Indian agriculture remain very nascent, though we see some examples. The absence of a developed innovation ecosystem to encourage a culture of research, identifying and nurturing pioneering solutions and support implementation efforts has led to low levels of biotech-related innovations. Another area with limited or no innovation in India is in standalone agro-logistics. In our report, we do a case study of Pinduoduo, China, whose highly successful model is hinged on leveraging the existing logistics players in the ecosystem. Such low-cost and high connectivity logistics remain an unexplored area of Indian AgTech innovation. Engagements with traditional input and output corporates in agribusinesses can be mutually beneficial for AgTechs looking to scale. Their vast networks of farmers and established financial and operational channels provide low-cost access to scale for startups. For agribusinesses, this presents an opportunity to enhance their service offerings to farmers via a digital channel. ThinkAg's survey of AgTech startups revealed that nearly half of the surveyed companies have a business-to-farmer offering as one of their business models. Leading startups like Cropin, Dehat, BigHeart, NinjaCart, etc. have each ventured into arrangements with giants like Bayer, Olam, ITC, and Big Basket. Though these collaborations are a movement in the right direction, they are still few in number and limited to nascent levels of engagement. This is largely driven by structural dissimilarities, leading to mismatched expectations. Our survey of stakeholders in the wider AgTech ecosystem revealed that startups are attempting to demonstrate scalability through bundling of services. They also see that if they're not able to demonstrate scalability, it's going to be challenging to raise more capital. And this mirrors the key concerns among investors and corporate entities. On the investor side, investors are constrained by the finite duration of their funds and also are apprehensive about the timelines AgTech startups require to scale. Corporate players have yet to significantly participate in the ecosystem. However, the situation brought by the pandemic has increased their involvement. Despite some setbacks faced by AgTechs in the initial months of the pandemic, the sector's resilience on an overall basis and the role of AgTech solutions had in driving enthusiasm for the sector, we find that majority of the innovators and the investors have expressed optimism about Indian AgTech in the years to come. Smallholder farmers, a very, very important target audience and stakeholder for AgTech. High costs of accessing and onboarding individual smallholder farmers, coupled with smallholders' low risk tolerance, poses an uphill battle for AgTech startups. AgTech startups identify a strong need for a physical on-ground presence to build trust and augment adoption among farmers, especially smallholders. Leveraging a next to last mile approach through aggregation institutions like FPO could lower the cost for AgTechs to reach smallholder farmers. Partnerships with other businesses, local businesses like agri-businesses or other local businesses that serve as frequent touch points to reach smallholder farmers could also be leveraged. Our study identified 3 dimensions that hold promise for scaling. Public sector programs targeted at farmers should actively invite AgTechs to offer services across the value chain, something that Andrew also mentioned. Established agribusinesses should lead the effort to develop on-field pilots while building integration pipelines with their own service offerings. This requires structural shift within these large agribusinesses, and I think something that large investors like IFC and others could actually influence these large companies to move forward faster. And finally, a data pipeline from AgTechs to fintech players could go a long way towards augmenting the fortunes of the AgTech startups in the coming years. So looking ahead, what do we see? With the pandemic-induced crisis stretching on, the need for robust, efficient, transparent supply chains is all the more pressing. Supply chain innovations are therefore likely to continue their dominance in Indian AgTech. Opportunities to build efficiency across fishery, aquaculture, poultry, etc. are both ample and attractive, and will definitely see a lot of activity in the coming years. We've seen a few startups in this space in India and more in Southeast Asia, and we see a lot of that innovation also coming onshore. Partnerships show a promise. This includes partnerships between Indian AgTechs as well as ventures with global AgTechs, and collaborations with agribusinesses and financial service organizations as well. The public sector role in these partnerships will be crucial to ensure growth and adoption. For the sector to see genuine revolutionary product innovation, support for an agri-specific research and innovation ecosystem will need to be bolstered, something to be considered for public good investments. Initiatives encouraging entrepreneurship among domain experts and a robust incubation assistance will be critical. And finally, the imperatives of a sustainable food system calls on us to adopt an agri-food tech lens and not just a pure AgTech lens, and view the innovation surrounding cultivation, production, and consumption on the same continuum. AgTech in India and in the region has the potential to create significant value in agriculture. However, there are numerous barriers across information, logistics, financial that impede its benefit to smallholder farmers. Public good investments of the kind that we discussed today will be crucial to overcoming this. At ThinkAg, we will continue to work with all stakeholders to share our inputs as this framework is developing going forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Raman. That's a pretty comprehensive view. And it kind of links into some of the deep dive things that we had come across as well. Some of there's a good thread of connectivity with what we did on a global basis with our deep dive on AgTech. So, and it also brings out the unique environment India is, and the need for both private and public sector engagements to enhance the adoption of AgTech solutions. So with that, I just wanted to turn it over to Parmesh. It's a nice segue into the discussion, the panel that he's going to moderate. So over to you, Parmesh.
Thank you very much, Prasad, and thank you, Raman, for a very insightful presentation. I think you really summarized the report so well and really draws practical conclusions out of that. I would now urge the participants not to be shy and start posing your questions in the chat, because I will bring your questions and bring Raman into the discussion also as a part of the panel. And the panel will also enjoy listening to your views and responding to that. So please start posing your questions. Thanks, Dr. Vani, for kicking us off in terms of questions, but there are many interesting participants who might have more questions, and so please keep them coming. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure now to moderate a panel discussion. It's like a chat. I will do this more like a fireside chat as opposed to a discussion, a traditional one. And we have a very illustrious panel today. And what I will do is that I will introduce them one by one when they come and talk about and give their perspective about what they, in their individual thought leader capacity, as well as in their own institutional capacity, are doing in this field, and share their experience. So the first round is about 5 to 6 minutes, each panelist. And I'll ask Dr. Harsh Banwala to kick us off. He's currently the chairman of Capital India Finance, financial service company. He was previously the chairman of NABARD, which all of you know, which is the India's bank, apex bank, which oversees all kinds of agriculture credit and cooperative banks. So he has, a lot of experience in these, and he also has held a lot of board positions there. And right now, he is a non-executive independent director at Bayer Crop Science, and also ARIA Collateral Warehousing Services, and also advising Omnivore, one of the large firms which are working in this area. So Harsh, can you talk a little bit about your own perspective on what is happening in this space, and what has been your experience both with NABARD and your new incarnation on these AgTechs? Give a flavor of what are you seeing in the sector now. Over to you, Harsh. And then I will then bring Purvi, just people should know, and then I'll bring Dr. Satyanarayana and then Graham. This is the order in which I'm going. So please be ready once Harsh finishes. Over to you, Harsh.
Right. Thank you, Pramesh, and thank you all the people who strive to organize this webinar. First of all, we haven't seen this kind of activity in AgTech space in India in earlier times, even if the fund flow for last 2 years have come down, investment flows. And that is because of the opportunities available in the sector. You know, we are the largest producer of many commodities. We have a large number of small farmers, potential to collaborate and bring institutions, as also diversity of climate available across the country, sustainability issues in the face of climate change. All this requires a good strategy formulation, which cannot happen without a good database. And the data in traditional form, in physical form, I feel is going to be very difficult to manage. So it has to be digitized. And when I was in NABARD, we broadly did three, four things. One is to spur investment. We started contributing to developmental capital to various other alternate investment funds. I think we presently are collaborating with more than 16 funds, more than 500 crores committed from our side, and leveraging further investments down. We also started a alternate investment fund of our own. And I'm saying, as an enabler, NABARD should now think of creating a fund of funds for AgTechs, which will nurture other funds in a much bigger way. And also carry, so this capital development side is one thing. Second is, to be a market player, I think you have to do financial literacy, digital literacy. Then also, I would say, digitize the data of SHGs, the data of FPOs. So this is market making role, which can be used by various AgTech players subsequently for their own use and for offering services. And Agriculture Ministry has rightly come out with the concept of idea, which I will not deliberate. My colleague on the panel will deliberate on that. But the way in fintechs, there is a core banking solution from the banks and a lot of APIs plug and play. So I think the newer development of AgTechs is going to be such that they will see a problem in the agriculture space, bring a solution to that, and have the core stack, which is with the support of the government of India and the state governments, be it the land data or be it the animal resources data, or combining the two with the India stack, which is Aadhaar, etc., etc. So the penetration of internet and all other things is supporting all this. Now, also, in addition to this, NABARD plays a big role in supporting the physical infra. Connectivity is still an issue in rural areas. Electricity is also an issue. Sustained availability of electricity, even if you electrify a village, regular availability. Then market infrastructure. So agriculture infrastructure, along with other physical infrastructure, is going to be a key issue for us. Also, a lot of quality testing opportunities and logistics opportunities we are seeing will come. We created the dairy infrastructure fund to support that. we are pushing GIs, local for global. Now, unless how contracts will be done, how GI will be taken forward. So strategic market players, all these skill set deficiency, these are creating structural barriers. I think I have already taken quite a bit of time. I will not go beyond this at this stage. Subsequently, I'll cover it up. But mentors, incubators, accelerators in the public space with public funding, as also private people, a lot of agribusiness retired people are there. They can mentor each one of them. Most of this mentoring is happening around Bangalore. This needs to be taken forward to across the country. Although digitally, it's much easy to connect worldwide, but still physical proximity is going to play a role in a country like India. Thank you from my side. And I am very optimistic on the entire AgTech space playing a transformative this thing for Indian agriculture, because this is essential for enhanced income. And this cannot happen unless you access exports and diversified markets on a regular basis and overcome variability, seasonality. Thank you. Thank you, Pramesh.
A lot, Harsh, for covering a huge ground in a very short period. I really appreciate bringing your breadth and depth of your experience and ideas to bear on the topic. It's a very good kickoff. And next, I would sort of bring in now Purvi Mehta. Purvi is also a very well-known thought leader on this topic. Dr. Purvi Mehta is the Asia lead for agriculture at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Before that, she was with CGIR as head of Asia for International Livestock Research Institute. So we have not planned it. It seems like livestock is the theme of the day. Harsh already has a pedigree from India, and Purvi also has a livestock affiliation earlier. She was also the head of the South Asia Biosafety Program at IFPRI, and she has also been on the board of many organizations like International Center for Rural Agriculture in the Netherlands, and been an independent director on NCDX, our own commodity exchange, and also on many other things. So Purvi, over to you. Please give the perspective of your own thinking on this and the Gates Foundation perspective on that. You also have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Parmesh, and really very nice to see a lot of familiar faces. So Parmesh, Prasad, thank you very much for creating this forum. We have been wanting to talk about these exciting developments in this country. So thank you very much. And what I really like about this is, we are talking about solutions and not diagnosing the problem. One of the fantastic thing to see, including in Raman's report, is that there has been very, very few technologies in the history of agriculture sciences which has had, such rapid growth like what digital technology has brought in. The connection that you brought between AgTech and digital is also very interesting to me, because today, if we see the AgTechs which has been developed in last 2 years in South Asia in general, but in India in particular, close to 87% of the AgTechs have been, are based on digital infrastructure, right? So I think digital and AgTech are going really hand in hand together. And, we sometimes get spoiled by the rapid growth of technology. A report that came out only about 6 years ago shows that less than 10% of the new technologies or the AgTechs that were getting registered were directly linked to digital. So it has been a really, really rapid growth. One other very striking thing to me is, this is one of the very, very few technologies in agriculture where we have not had to have a push, and the technology has pulled itself on its own. I mean, frankly, most of the seed technologies, input supply technologies, NRMs, natural resource management related technologies, and so forth in the history, either we've had to had public sector subsidies joined with that, or lots of huge promotions. Digital technology is one where the people have pulled it And today the fantastic figures that we see in India, for example, over 85% of the households have access to digital technology, which the number is going to go to 900 million people in this country by 2025. And the pandemic, in fact, brought a huge opportunity for that, especially for rural India, where the urban growth, I think, was at about 4% of internet access. The rural growth went to 13-14% in last 15 months. So it has created a lot of opportunities and lot of momentum on its own, rather than any public sector or any organizations having to push this technology. I think our collective responsibility as this group, for example, is to really build on that momentum. There has been very, very few technologies where we've not had to invest so much in creating momentum. Here, the momentum has been created. It's the question of how well we can optimize and how well the AgTech companies can really optimize. The key reason we as a foundation would get interested, and I think that's very similar to what Prasad, you and Andrew, you spoke about. For us, smallholder farmer is our ultimate client, right? And I think both from an access perspective, of course, any AgTech or any digital technologies that serve as a tool, not only from a knowledge management perspective, but access to market, which I wanted to really flag is an extremely underutilized but extremely high potential area. But at the same time, a very, very important component would be accountability, right? Digital often and data, Dr. Bhanwala, you spoke about data. I think a huge thrust so far of public sector has been in data collection. I think that needs to shift to data utilization. And there's where, any of these accountability structures of inclusion, accountabilities of commodity, including livestock that Dr. Bhanwala spoke about. I think these are some of the very, very important components of this, and it needs all these agri-tech, I feel, also needs a value chain approach. Equal emphasis on post-harvest part of the value chain, market access, and so forth, as much as pre-harvest. Today, it is quite skewed towards pre-harvest technology. So I think markets and market access for farmers is again a huge opportunity for any of these AgTech areas.
Thank you very much, Purvi, for sharing the perspective. We really value our partnership with Gates Foundation, and we work on this theme both globally and in Asia, Africa, and we look forward to working more collaboratively with you on that. And you are a real catalyst for a lot of innovations which are coming up in this sector. I will now bring in Dr. Satyanarayana. I think a lot of you know that he's a very recognized thought leader and has been a thought leader for quite some time. He went into this digital field and e-governance much before a lot of other people went in. And so he's currently the chairperson for India Digital Ecosystem of Agriculture Working Group, IDEA, which he will talk about. And he's the chief advisor for Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution in India at the World Economic Forum. He's been a thought leader in areas of e-governance, enterprise architecture, digital transformation, and he has had a successful career as a civil servant for over 40 years and has held many interesting positions, including Secretary, Department of Electronics and Information Technology in Government of India and Chairman UAIT. And so without further ado, Satya Garu, hand over to you now for sharing your perspective.
Thank you, Parmesh, for the intro. And really, a lot of keywords, the speakers before me told. And really nice to be in a position to be kind of sharing my thoughts on some of them. Like, for instance, in the Q&A chat, there is question like, can we not have something like UPI to make a difference for the agri space? How do we get data of good quality? How do you use, Purvi, for instance, said, okay, data is fine, but how do you use the data effectively? What are the building blocks for an AgTech space? How don't you focus only on point solutions, but have a value chain approach to the whole thing? How do you promote agri innovation? These are all, thoughts which came, in the last half an hour. So let me just, it's very difficult to address all of them in 5 minutes, but let me take that challenge. So I'm going to talk about 3 things. The first one is about IDEA, which has been mentioned by Parmesh and others, India Digital Ecosystem of Agriculture. Second one, AI for AI, which is AI for agriculture innovation. How do you kind of use a bunch of emerging technologies in the space of agriculture together in a value chain approach? And thirdly, how do you put it on ground in a project called Sagu Bagu, which is being done by the government of Telangana? Very quickly, next slide, please. So this is the value chain approach that is at the base of IDEA, that is the India Digital Ecosystem of Agriculture. So we have been doing point solutions, systems here and the systems there, etc. But the time has come when you have to elevate the pitch and raise the bar from a system to an ecosystem level. So this is the ecosystem, digital ecosystem for agriculture that has been conceptualized by the Ministry of Agriculture, and I happen to be the chairman of the group that is doing it at the national level. So it clearly, as you can see, the value nodes have been identified around 3 key persona here. The farmer on the one side, the markets on the other side, and the government and the governance aspects on the third, as a third dimension. So I will not go into detail, but suffice it to say that we are building around value. How do you enhance value, or how do you create new value around each of these nodes, around these stakeholders? Yeah. So that is the driver for this architecture, which is called IDEA, which I'm going to show in the next slide. So this is a very busy slide. One need not be kind of perturbed by the fact that it's quite complex looking, but you can see that it is at the core. We have an IDEA core, like the Aadhaar core or the GSTN core or the fintech core, which is called UPI. We have something in the innermost circle there as IDEA core, which has the basic information and data that everyone, whether it is public sector or private sector, they would like to use. And also in the green, you can see Unified Farmer Service Interface, which is a copy of UPI, I would say, translated into agriculture sector, from fintech space to agri space, UPI to UFSI. This addresses one of the suggestions also which came in the chat. So UFSI is going to be that lever which will really enable a lot of transformation to take place through exchange of data in an efficient manner. I will not go into the other blocks, but it is sufficient to say that this is made up of a number of building blocks, about 30 plus building blocks, as you can see. And it's a federated architecture where only the minimal thing, the innermost circle number 2 there, IDEA core, will be done by the government of India, and some part of the national layer, and rest is done by either the states or the private sector as such, and covers the entire spectrum of needs in the agriculture space. It's not going to happen overnight, but this is the vision, and it's going to be done in phases in a mission mode by the Ministry of Agriculture together with the states. So that's about IDEA. Yeah, can I go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so at the same time, there are a lot of concerns expressed about data and its proper use for the right purpose, the flip side of using data. So we have also, alongside in the IDEA document as such, created the 3P framework for data governance in general, but it involves protection, prevention, and promotion. Various aspects of data have been, how do you, like Puri said, having data is good, not good enough. How do you use it effectively for the right purposes? So the promotion of innovation using that data through regulated access to the data is what is essence of this. Yeah, next one. So the second one is called AI for AI, which is coming down a little bit or in a different dimension, which is AI for agricultural innovation, where you are trying to distill all the emerging technologies and trying to use them for benefiting the agriculture sector. So as part of the World Economic Forum's effort, jointly with the government of Telangana and the University of Agriculture, worked for about 6 to 7 months, and we identified 9 frameworks and 30 use cases, which could make a huge difference to the space. Yeah, next one, please. So this is a snapshot, which is again busy. As they said, devil is in the detail. So a lot of detail is in this slide, but very simply stated, these 9 frameworks they operate a top-down approach. That is, the framework for precision agriculture, the framework for agriculture data marketplace or data exchanges, standards on the right side, and the busiest portion in the below, deep blue, is a set of prioritized use cases which are likely to make maximum impact. So this cuts across the entire value chain, as you see, right from crop planning to smart farming to farm gate to fork to data governance. So the whole holistic view is taken of what are all the things that can be done using emerging technologies, not necessarily AI. AI is only for the sake of a catchy name we put it, but it uses other technologies like IoT, satellite data, and other as well in this. This report has been published, and we are about to take a large pilot with the help of government of Telangana very shortly. Yeah. So this is the second component I wanted to say, where technology. And the third and last one is about, next one, please. Next one is called Sagu Bagu, which in Telugu means agriculture and advancement, or advancement through agriculture, one can say. And the government of Telangana has issued the expression of interest. The idea is to try out those 9 frameworks and 30 use cases in a concentrated manner in a geography, selected geography and selected crops. So working with FPOs in about 1,000 villages and 100,000 farmers in about 2 years' time, and to make a difference with all these new technologies and those kind of use cases mentioned in the previous slide. So as I talk, the EVO is on, and then there is a lot of excitement in the community, and we are hoping to get very good response to this, and then put these solutions on the ground in 6 months' time from now. Yeah. So net, a lot of things are happening both at the national level as well as at the state and at the ground level. I just wanted to paint a very quick picture of that. There are, of course, number of enablers which are required to be put in place in terms of policy for data. Then there should be a data exchange, data standards. Like, in the health case, you have the FHIR, Fast Health Interoperability Resources. So you need to have standards in agriculture today to make the whole supply chain and value chain work. So these are all issues which will be addressed in these projects. So I have done a rapid, disposition of all these 3 major initiatives, but I hope it gives you an idea. Thank you, Parmesh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satyanarayana. Very great presentation and a very short period. I know there are brilliant ideas there which you are working on, and to make it in such a short period is very great. And I think this calls for a standalone webinar on this, and we will invite you again to present these things in more detail, along with the other people in your working group, and particularly the people in government in Telangana who are working with you on this, plus the other partners. I think this has raised a lot of good ideas for us, that what we should be doing as a World Bank, and probably for Gates also as a public investment going forward, because data is a very important enabler. A recent study we did now globally showed that most AgTech startups are spending 80% time on collecting data, only 15% time on developing products and services, and only 5% on scaling up. So this is one of the biggest bottlenecks of why AgTech is not getting scaled up, because a lot of capital is used by lots of startups to collect this data, and yet they don't have the appropriate data there. So if we unlock that bottleneck, we might see a huge scaling up of that. Our experience in Kenya shows that we had almost 3 times more scaling up when we invested in data. So I'm very conscious that this has impact, and we have now evidence that it has impact. So last but not the least, I want to invite my good friend and earlier colleague, Graham Dixie. Graham is also a very sort of known thought leader in this area. Graham is now the executive director of Grow Asia. It's a multi-stakeholder partnership that catalyzes action on inclusive agriculture development in Southeast Asia, working with many stakeholders currently. He has tons of experience as practitioner of agriculture development, worked in about 75 countries, was agribusiness advisor to the World Bank, and also has been advisor to Gates and IFAD as well. So over to you, Graham. Again, 5 minutes to you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Parmesh. And great to see some old familiar faces like Andrew and colleagues from the IFC and so on. So that's great. Just to give you a little bit of context, I mean, I've divided what I was going to say into 3, so I hope that the other 2 we have time for. But the first piece was just, how institutionally did we get to what the issues were on digital and what were the problems that were emerging? Just as a bit of context, Grow Asia is a multi-stakeholder partnership. Its basic idea is that if you can get a dialogue between the public sector, the producers, and the private sector, the balance of probabilities, they can make better decisions. And you can see it in Denmark, you can see it in which has been doing it 100 years, Kenya does it on its horticultural export industry and so on. The second thing is that we positioned ourselves to become an accredited entity with the ASEAN. And this enabled us to be able to speak directly to the 10 ministers of the ASEAN region and the senior officials. I guess it would be a bit like bringing together all the state ministers of agriculture to have a discussion and to have an input and see how they can coordinate their supply. So that's the sort of area that we're operating. We work in getting those partnerships, and there's about 600 partnerships, half of the private sector, half of the big multinationals, the other half are local businesses, and the other 50% is made up of farmer organizations, NGOs, and state organizations. So we bring them together, and we have, and the important thing is that they talk with one another and they learn from one another. And what we learned from them was that they saw that agricultural technologies had the greatest potential to make change. And they talked about traceability, they talked about finding out which farmers are most likely to repay their loans, they talked about advisory services. And they said that the point was that what was happening in technology was the goalposts were moving so quickly they couldn't keep up. And a lot of them had wasted money. So the first thing they wanted to do was learn. So we set up a series of webinars, which were regional, and it created a community of practice. And it emerged out of that was a few really committed companies who helped fund the rest of the programs. We started with hackathons. We found they were a lot of fun, but they didn't really move the needle at all. What did move the needle was, what you've alluded to, was accelerators, bringing in mentors, because so often we found the startups didn't have a business sense. They had a project sense, but not a business sense. And the other thing was to get the challenge statement right, to emerge what are the key issues that are affecting that you're looking for digital solutions to come out of. The next thing we discovered was that there's quite a big gap between digital magicians and farmers. And in order to bridge that gap, we brought in human-centered design. And that was to take founders, agribusinesses, and financiers to spend time actually living in a village to get a sense of what farmers were capable of in order to mesh that together, but also to do the other thing, which was so important, which is to bring the investors and the founders and the agribusinesses together in the same platform that they can work. So that was one side. The other side was learning. We've done landscape studies and so on and so forth, which has revealed things, digital technology, digital credit scoring. But one thing that was really interesting was to actually carry out a survey of farmers to find out how were they using their digital tools. And what emerged was, yes, they use their telephone a lot. And that was a tool for all sorts of things. but only about 1% had ever used an agricultural app. But what they did do was about between 20 and 40%, depending on which country we did the survey in, inhabited chat rooms. The next thing was COVID, and the COVID, revealed to us that there were, that it exposed really the weaknesses in the food supply system in Southeast Asia. And in particular, rural logistics was a huge problem. The issues of how you, the market inflexibility, the slowing of cash flow, and the fact that governments actually were a bit stymied as to what they were meant to be doing. And what we did then was gather together a conference call with 120 people, bringing the ministers, the CEOs together to drill into what those issues were. And then out of that, we formed 4 working groups that came out with really practical solutions right across the region from all those different sectors. And they met 4 times to say, these are the key issues. So that's how we've tried to focus on what are the problems coming up from the ground, what are the things that people really need, and to try to mesh together the public sector, the private sector, and the producers. Parmesh, I can leave it like that, and if I can, I'll have an opportunity later to come back with one thing to cover on the enabling environment, and secondly, on some really practical solutions that we think could make a big difference on the ground. Over.
Thanks a lot, Graham. I think we can cover that in the next round. What you are seeing on the chat is some very interesting ideas and there. So please keep on watching, because I'll bring these questions into the discussion now, because we can't have the audience feeling that we have not incorporated their thinking into the panel. Now I would like to start with Purvi first in this round. And I think the second question I have is that what are the key enablers for developing AgTech and data-driven digital approaches in India, and what are the public policies and foundational investments required to do that? Also, we are seeing increasing pool of AgTech startups, and how can we provide them an enabling environment to incubate, grow, and accelerate? And how can be these financed, and what will be the role of blended finance, and do we need innovation in finance to do it? It's a set of questions which is coming, and this is what we are getting from the audience also. That are we going to work in a kind of a narrow kind of a way, or are we going to work in a more integrated way, basically? Are we going to have at the cusp of the downstream, upstream, or the fintech and AgTech coming together? So can you now focus your attention on what should be the public investments which will trigger and enable the growth of this sector? Purvi, I'll start with you first. Please go ahead.
Thank you. That was too many questions, Parmesh, but I'll try and club them. I think, as Graham also mentioned just now, in terms of the public-private partnerships, I think there are, number one, let me really say that public-private partnership is a great idea, and we constantly talk about that, but there are very, very few concrete examples of where this really has happened and really works. So I think we really need to pay attention to that one. But I think in terms of the data that we are talking about, if we broadly categorize them into 3 things, number one is data collection that we've spoken about, and I'm trying to just bring in all the points that the various other panelists have said. So data collection, if that's one bucket, the second one would be data utilization, and third would be the scaling, right? Data utilization in the sense that innovation and how do you optimize that, and scaling. I think the IDEA report also has these type of bucketing that was just presented. I think the public sector, of course, can play a very important role in data collection, because that's not a great value of time for private sector, A, and it's number two is it also often becomes a disincentive for a private sector, because there is a lot of data they should be able to just utilize upon that rather than going out there and collecting another set of data. So I think data collection, data custody, I do understand the regulatory issues there. Let that be the public sector predominantly. And scaling also should be, can also be public sector. The reason I say scaling also could be public sector's key role is also because, that way there is a whole inclusion lens that can be brought. The farmers, for example, right now, most of the technologies reach 3 or 4 commodities much faster: rice, wheat, milk, and cotton, right? We know this in this country. And so diversification within the commodities, smallholder farmers commodity, scaling to smaller sectors of farmers, I think that scaling part the government can do much better. And the second one would be within the sectors. Look, there are areas such as, for example, water management. There are areas such as environment protection. This may or may not be of a direct interest to a private sector. There's where that complementarity of public-private partnership comes in. And so I would think data collection and scaling can be predominantly public sector. Data utilization and innovation in AgTech could be predominantly private sector, and this can create a real good win-win, and that whole inclusion lens that we've spoken about.
A lot, Purvi. That's a very good. So I would like to club another question with what we are doing before you go. What should be the role of World Bank and IFC in this? That's a selfish question for me and Prasad, because we're asking some free advice from such an illustrious panel. Yeah.
Couple of things. Number one is, I think, and this applies to any development organization, including ours, right? One is not try and boil the ocean, because we can't. Play a catalytic role rather than playing an implementation role is first thing I would say. In creating those use cases, having scaling partners right from the beginning with us and let them scale rather than we trying to do that. Number two is, look, there is a real need for creating a common thread between the various innovations. Today, Orissa, for example, in a place like Orissa, a farmer on an average has about 38 apps on that person can download on his or her mobile, which are all agri-related apps, right? Somebody gives climate information and somebody gives some other information and all of that. There needs to be a common thread that runs between that. And I think unbiased agencies, which are neither public sector nor private sector, can create that. Number two, I think, would be, of course, smallholder farmer focused. I really feel that including those people as business partners, and making them compatible and attractive enough for industry to go to them is, I think, something we could do. And my last point, I think, also would be around, very similar to the priority sector lending. Just sort of focusing on some of the commodities which needs more attention but hold huge potentials. Again, one of the examples would be livestock, and also bringing quality control in all these AgTech that's going on. Conflicting messages going to the farmers. There needs to be some kind of a quality control. It's not just a question of how many farmers one reaches, it is also what reaches the farmers. So I think these are some of the roles that agencies like yours, which play an extremely important role, can bring in.
Thanks a lot, Purvi. So I'll now go to Satya for his thoughts on what should be the enabler. He's already talked about a lot of enablers already, and he's working on a number of enablers already. So give your thoughts on what should be, and again, the same question of what should be the World Bank and IFC working on. So I'm trying to club the question because we are running short of time. So I'm trying to club the two questions now.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Satya.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to come to Harsh and then to Graham.
Thank you, Parmesh. In terms of what World Bank like organizations should do, I would put three things as the top on the agenda. The first one is creating a framework for public-private partnership in the AgTech space. Is currently, there is a kind of hesitation in this space. So how do you, for instance, justify the investment? How do you ensure that the investors, as well as the startups that put their entire effort innovation there, get compensated and grow in terms of the revenue model, and what kind of tariff structure should be best? And at the same time, farm sector being a very sensitive sector, how do you see that the value is equitably distributed through a PPP model? So PPP framework which is cut out for agri sector is something which is very important and need of the hour. The bank had come up in 2015 for PPP in generic terms, a very nice and interesting document. I would say that, can you turn it around the agri-tech space, and create a PPP framework? Is one. The second one is the standards. A lot has been said about data, the need for data with the new oil, or so many encomiums about data, and the need for using it in a effective manner with the use of all new technologies. But unfortunately, we don't have standards on this. I mentioned before in my earlier intervention also. I will not elaborate on that. A standard for exchange of data on the lines of health, which is already robust at this point of time. So can we have similar data interoperability data standards? Can the bank promote that as a point? It will do a huge, public good if we are able to. Entire supply chain will become, that much more efficient. And the third and last one I would say is, again repeating, something like UFSI. Can we unified farmer service interface on the lines of UPI? UPI made a huge difference in India, right? A small kirana shop owner or a small pushcart vendor is able to use, receive and make payments within seconds. So UPI has made that kind of a difference. So can we make a difference in the farm sector through UFSI? What can the bank do in this? So 3 areas: PPP, standards, UFSI, period.
I think I personally feel that UFSI could be a game changer completely. And I think as we have done on UID, UPI, we have taken lead. And I think those models are sought globally. We have requests for taking these approaches to other countries coming almost on a weekly basis. So I think UFSI will be a very foundational kind of an investment. And we need to talk about how we can work with you very closely on this to take this to the next level. So very, very great idea. Harsh, over to you. You are in a very unique space. You are yourself leading a finance company. You are also on the boards of a lot of these AgTech startups who are starting. And you also are very passionate in NABARD. You tried a lot of new things which came in, and you still have a lot of recommendations for the fund of funds and what you talk about. So please give the same perspective. What should be the enablers, and what should World Bank and IFC do in this space?
Thank you. First of all, about enablers, I will not repeat what others have said. I agree with many of the points by Mr. Satnarayan as well as Purvi. But if you look at history, Parmesh, the largest scaling up happens when the farmers themselves feel convinced about products and services which will benefit them. Green revolution, or whatever it is. A new technology, new seed, new pesticide, word of mouth campaign spreads. So any scaling up exercise without people's active participation would be very difficult to scale it up. So this thing is, it is not just PPP, it is 4 Ps. So the system has to be, farmer, we have such a large 12 crore families. 14, somewhere it is 12.5, somewhere it is 14. So let's say, and 60 crore people, 600 million people. And, if they don't have any stake. So that's why I would say, for any digital revolution in agriculture, 3 pillars are going to be the social capital that we create around this, the finance capital and technological capital. Most of our startups are very good in the the technological capital part of it, and whereas the finance, there is a joke going around that it's difficult to get an engineer rather than to get 5 million funding from somewhere for a new startup in Bangalore. So finance is pretty easily available today for many of the new ideas coming up. But the involvement of people, be it success stories, large scale, what we did in SHG movement in late 90s, you know, that momentum, if it has to come, it cannot come without active participation of the people and through regional languages. That's another very important thing. You can't just have English or Hindi being there. You have to be vernacular. So that's one part. PPP. That is the next thing which I'm saying. In addition, what are this UFSI which Satnarayan Sir was saying? It was much easier in the finance space because it was just payment which was there. So we have to define the core requirements of farmer to make a service available to him, which is the core service, and others can just come in. So is it the land, or we can continue unless we come up with that. It'll be difficult to offer a service which will be appreciated by all farmers. Somebody requires a different. It's a state subject because farming or agriculture is so different from one state to another at many times. But there are certain common features which are requirements of the farmer across states, across regions. So that has to be defined well and offered to make it successful. I think we need to invest in digital. We have to overhaul the agriculture education system. We have to work with existing institutions, which are not just private but semi-private, as also through funds. IFC can invest through encourage private sector. Also encourage some of the existing agriculture players. I was discussing somewhere the procurement and the agri input through FPOs. We talk so much about FPOs today. Is just 5 to 10% of the total outlay of an entity like who's an agri input supplier of the total business. So although it has a potential, so unless they come forward to have a small farmer on board, it'll be difficult. And thirdly, broadly, I agree with the space which Purvi and Satnarayan Saab has said. But even for private sector to offer some of these things, and we have to define the standards and the use, whatever data is being used, they have to pay for it. And to break even for an agri startup in agriculture is longer than other fintech players or something. It's much easier. So there has to be some kind of developmental capital which is with longer gestation rather than just hurdle rate being high or people start looking for returns very quickly. So those may not come from the startups that easily. So I think we have to look at if somebody puts in 100 rupees today, at least minimum 7 years to reap benefits. And we are with Omnivore, we are closer to 2-3 startups in next 2-3 years becoming unicorns. They have the potential, but they've already had so much of time, and they should continue to solve problems of the farmers and connect with them. That's my last word. And we should have a lot of funding for incubators, accelerators, create a team of mentors. There is so much of a deficit. A lot of agribusiness professionals today are having a very good retired life after their corporate lives end. I'm not saying it to you, Raman, and in any way, but you're actively engaged, a lot of others as well. So can we rope them in? And a team of professionals could be created, and they need to be, they're willing to pay back, but some of their expenses need to be taken care of. So now, can we have technology, technical assistance, which, on a larger scale and not just limited to government entities, for such unique collaborations which are required between private sector, universities, local social institutions, and NGOs, as also the startups. So can we have some kind of a technical assistance which envisages them all, and then they're taken forward? I think I'm done. I will not go more than this. I've taken quite a bit of time, but let me thank you profusely. It was a different field to come to this webinar. A lot of new things and a lot of new learnings. I think going forward, this will be a milestone in doing something innovative in this regard in terms of policy formulation or organization building, etc. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Harsh. It shows your passion to this agenda, and we look forward to working very closely with you as we go forward. And last but not least, Graham, I'm going to bring you in now, and please be brief because we are already running behind schedule. If you don't mind, again the same thing. What are the enablers from your perspective, and what should World Bank and IFC do? I'll actually briefly bring Raman at the end to reflect a little bit on what he's saying, and then I'll go to Prasad to close the webinar.
So I'll concentrate on initially on the enabling side. For us, the most important enabling policy will be digital payments, because it opens up a whole vista of digital marketing, smart subsidies, and edging people, the unbankable into the bankable, and the buying and selling of product. And one of the great examples in Southeast Asia is in Cambodia, with Wing Money, driven by the deputy governor of the bank, and it's now been operating 10 years, but their market penetration is interestingly bigger than M-Pesa by proportion. It opens up all the other vistas, and it gives people, farmers, the incentive to start moving more into the digital space. It also opens up another thing, because we have a quandary, which is that if we are going to make farmers more profitable and keep production down, one of the only ways we can do that is lower transaction costs, and making a more competitive new marketing system by digital marketing. And I'm not just talking about selling mangoes to the wealthy middle class, but actually using what digital marketing can do to deliver product through the traditional marketing and the main supply food chains is something which is really important. The second piece on the enabling environment is something which is always a mystery to me. Some brilliant person in development said it's much more expensive to create Wi-Fi infrastructure in the rural space. You reach about 1/10 of the people, and it costs twice as much. So it's about 1/20th of the profitability of investing in the urban space. So the point here is, somebody said you need to be able to mandate off a portion of cell phone companies' turnover into a government fund to invest in the rural. Most of those funds, the universal access or service funds, have not been accessed in our region. Why? There are funds sitting there which can enable and open that vista. And then taking two practical things. One of the things that really came out is probably the weakest point, and the one that we've thought little about, is the first mile logistics. Your own seminar that you did with Taniha pointed out the 300% margin that those truckers in the rural space actually do. They're informal. This is not something that the private sector can do for a profit, but we do need an open source application to enable people in the rural space to act as cargo consolidators, to create one single load out of 4 or 5 farmers with product going down to Jakarta or to Delhi, and then to be able to put it out for bidding from the local truckers who are normally informal businesses or empty back hauls. I think that could take a significant portion of cost out of our system and improve efficiency and so on. And the final area is the point that I made about how little farmers in our region are using applications, but they do inhabit chat rooms. And the private sector has figured out you can introduce into chat rooms influencers to change, to guide the conversation. We could apply the same sort of thing to digital extension officers. Instead of going out on a motorcycle and talking to 3 farmers, they could be standing in a chat room and influencing the conversation of 120 farmers. We need some more creativity in governments the way they do it. And I would also suggest that actually I think what is coming out of the Ag Results program, which is to pay people to deliver those results, to pay the private sector if and when they deliver results, is a new tool in the aid and public sector toolbox to incentivize and to make things happen that wouldn't happen normally. And that is by bringing the ideas from the public sector and getting the private sector to deliver. Over.
Sure, on mute.
Thanks, Graham, for sharing these rich ideas. They're absolutely a new stream of ideas which we could really build on in the next event. So, Raman, now over to you. Can you sort of reflect a little bit on what you heard? And what do you see as the link from what reports you are presenting, and what do you see as the way forward? And then I'll go to Prasad after this, basically to talk about what's happening in that space and what is his takeaway from that. And finally, I'll say from the bank's perspective how we're going to follow up on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Parmesh, and thanks everybody. I think at the outset, Parmesh, our earliest conversations on this topic, I think our objectives for today have been actually exceeded, given the variety and the intensity of suggestions ideas that we've received from all across the panel and also in the chat room. I think there is a lot to be done. It also clearly points out that there is a recognition that there is a future for AgTech. However, that future of AgTech is going to be incomplete without a partnership with what the public good investment is going to bring in. So I think that is, to me, a brilliant recognition. The idea framework itself is a starting point for that. I think the key here is how do we accelerate this journey? The farmers cannot wait. We know that. However, there is a need to do this in a fast-paced manner, which leads me to the second point. I think this is a point that Dr. Bhanwala also made. We need to create a safe space for people to experiment and fail. Okay? Sandboxes, I have not seen many in AgTech, frankly. I think this is a public good investment that needs to come, and that needs to come ASAP. While there is a crying need for good quality IT resources, sandboxes will get more and more people who may be partially IT qualified to come into the space and present solutions. I think that's something I believe that the World Bank Group and other bilaterals and multilaterals could look at to accelerate investments in that sandboxes, and not just in India, but the entire world where smallholder farmers are operating, because ultimately they are the real beneficiaries. I mean, 500 million smallholders across the world are not touched by the technologies we're talking about, right? So I think that's the second point I want to add to what everybody said. And the third point, picking up what Purvi mentioned about the farmer in Odisha who's got 38 odd apps. I mean, I can tell you from my own usage of apps on my phone, I may be looking at 3, 4, 5 apps at any point in time in a day. My work with AgTech implementation on the ground, one of the farmers said, Saab, why do I need to use this particular app? Why can't I get an SMS or a WhatsApp message or a YouTube link, right? Now, this is something that I hear across the board from many different farmers. Now, here is not a revolution, but a heretical idea. Can we create an app-free service or an app-agnostic service? Let's not say app-free service, or an app-agnostic service. Let's not confuse it with free apps. What I talked about in my presentation on freemiums. But can it be an app-agnostic service, right? That will provide at least the foundation, what Purvi mentioned, right? At least the foundation for the farmers. And I think that's, again, something where public good investments need to come, because this is system level thinking. This is not individual value chain or value chain player type thinking. This is where people with diverse experiences and backgrounds, like on this panel, come together to actually think through those and put a conceptual framework to say, how do we create an app-free environment for farmers to actually get a core level of service benefit? Yeah, we will see adoption. What Dr. Bhanwala said, we've always had adoption. It's not a problem. But I think in that environment, we will see adoption. So these are my 3 fundamental points that I'm picking up from the conversation. Now, going forward, Parmesh, I think, and speaking on behalf of ThinkAg and my own work that I do, I think this is a space where we need a lot of professionals, many more professionals to come in. I gave up a lucrative corporate career to be part of this value chain because I realized corporates don't really have an agenda beyond their profit and loss statements. Whereas agriculture and agriculture businesses have to have a much broader agenda to deliver value. So I think a lot of professionals need to be encouraged. I don't have an answer how, but I think that's something that we will need to see. And ThinkAg, happy to partner with you guys and others who are keen to take this forward to actually build on this, the points that have come up today, and also what we will hear from people going forward. So I'll stop here. Thanks again for hosting us, Parmesh. Over to you.
And it's good to have your energy and passion, and I think this report was a good excuse to get everyone on around this table, because because we wanted really a free flowing of ideas, and that's what happened. And I would promise that we will harvest all the ideas. It's being recorded, all the chat is being harvested, and we're going to put a public small kind of a ideas note based on today's webinar, so that we don't lose out on these rich things we got. Prasad, I don't think we can sum up this because it's prolific.
Exactly.
We can summarize, but please give your final concluding thoughts on what you took out for IFC out of this webinar.
Look, I think it's a super rich discussion, so I'm happy that I was kind of roped into this webinar. So look, I think, yes, we talk about all the issues in India, right? But when I sit from the outside looking in, look, I'm from India, but it's one of the bright spots in the AgTech community in the world, by the way. So I think we blame, this is the argumentative Indian kind of philosophy, right? We think of the cup as half empty sometimes. So yes, there's a lot to do, but I think of it as half full, yes. I look at Latin America, which is a powerhouse in agriculture. The advancement in technology, the AgTech ecosystem is not that significantly better than what it is in India. In fact, India has received far more investments in the space than LAC from our perspective. So I think it's the ecosystem is also somewhat, in my view, I think with both the public and the private sector focusing on this, it's actually quite interesting. So I take a lot from this in terms, I think, of course, India is unique. Its environment is unique, the ecosystem is unique. So you need to have local solutions or adapting in global solutions to the local side. So I see that as obviously something that we need to focus on. And the other key takeaway for me is the link between what we are trying to do, Parmesh, jointly doing things between the bank and IFC. How can we actually look at creating the ecosystem from a public good perspective, but also from the private sector coming in and actually paying for some of these enabling environment issues, as well as devolving their business models a little bit. So, and accelerators, incubators came out very I think everybody mentioned it. So I think we need to look at it, and attracting professionals, mentors into this space is something that I took away from this conversation. And ultimately, I think we're all focusing on smallholders. I think the other aspect is, smallholders are also consumers. So I think we need to also look at them as, yes, they are business entities in a sense. They're all private sector players, if you look at it, right? So ultimately, it is involving the private sector in a sense at the smallholder level as well. So I just want to take that. And look, we are focusing on India as an investment, or from a venture capital perspective, and also to see companies like Olam and others looking at India as a sourcing base and deploying technologies. We've done a fair bit on climate, so it's with Olam in the sugarcane sector in India, but we're looking at more models that can be deployed through our lead firms as well. So I want to leave it at that. Over to you, Parmesh. And I want to
thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Prasad. So I think, as you have said, I want to thank everyone, all the panelists, for such a rich array of, because you have shared your thoughts, your ideas, examples, forward-looking thinking about how the sector would grow. It's very rich. I also want to thank all the people on the audience, which I think we will do a better job of incorporating their questions next time. But we're going to harvest all your questions, and we're going to send those questions to all the panelists for a brief response later on, because this is what we have started doing now. We harvest questions, and then we send for brief responses from the panelists, and that becomes part of the proceedings, because there are some brilliant thoughts and ideas which a lot of participants which participated today gave. From World Bank side, we are interested in working on 2 or 3 things going forward. First is really work on data, as Satya also talked about. Data is a very big pillar, and it has a significant public good element into it. which I think should be invested in more systematically so that we let the sector grow much faster. The second is what Harsh has been talking about, the whole education, agriculture education part, making it really the next generation agriculture education. So I passed out from Patnagar in 1980, and I have offered to my alma mater that we will support a new kind of whole course, an incubator in the Patnagar University on AgTech, basically. So I'm personally also now feeling that I should do more for my own alma mater to bring a foundational course on digital agriculture and AgTech into the system. So I think all of us, like Harsh goes to India and does the same thing, and all of us do that, then I think it will happen, and we can create a momentum around that also. The second is this knowledge and learning platform. I think we need very rapid exchange of knowledge and learning, people talked about. And the third is this whole scaling up of this mentorship, incubation, and acceleration. I think this is what we are getting from Africa. We have started investing in Africa on these incubators and accelerators. It has really developed the quality of the startups coming in. This has improved considerably. Also, we get a lot of startups coming from IT and ICT and technology, but we don't have people from agriculture who are studying agriculture starting startups to that extent. The percentage is, I think, 20-80 right now. So I think our job is to go to these institutions and do that. We are doing this in Kenya with the 3 major universities now, starting a program with Microsoft on kind of incubation on AgTech there. And we're doing this country by country. We're doing this in Morocco and other countries also. So I think a lot of these ideas, very good food for thought. And I look forward to working closely with you when we go forward and develop our strategy. And we'll invite you to really discuss our dedicated strategy for India and take your thoughts at that stage, but also involve you in implementation of some of the things we are going to do there. So next webinar is on 28th, and it is we are getting Acumen and Busara Center for Behavioral Economics coming and talking about climate change in Africa and what are the digital and data approaches coming in terms of climate change and resilience. That's going to be on 28th. We will send you all your announcement, and then Prasad and I are going to also talk about the AgTech deep dive, which I have seen the World Bank did, and present it to our board. We will make that presentation in the first week of October. Please look forward to the next webinars on this series. Thank you very much, and have a good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Harsh. Thank you, Graham.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Satya. Thank you.